It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our program today on U.S. Taiwan relations, actually U.S. Taiwan PRC relations. This seemed like a good time to do it. Tsai Ing-wen has been in office for about a year and a half. The 19th Party Congress is coming up pretty soon. Donald Trump's trip to Asia is coming up pretty soon, so this is a good time to take stock. And we have, I think, an excellent group of specialists to talk not only about Taiwan itself, which is important and a factor that doesn't always get as much attention as it should, but also U.S. Taiwan relations. To start off, we are very privileged to have my good friend Jim Moriarty speak to us on the topic of U.S. Taiwan relations and U.S. policy towards Taiwan. Jim is somebody that a lot of you know, especially those of you who spent time in the U.S. Foreign Service. And he has a distinguished career in the Foreign Service. Right now, the important thing that he's doing, and doing a good job at it, is representing the people of the United States towards Taiwan, and we're lucky to have him. So without further ado, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. I usually start off raising these things just a little bit. It is good to see a lot of old friends out here in the audience, and I want to thank Richard for his kind introduction. I'd also like to thank Richard for the strong stewardship of the American Institute in Taiwan he showed during his tenure. His efforts strengthened the Institute and enabled us to become better stewards of the important relationship between the United States and Taiwan. Can you hear me at the back of the room there? Okay, very good. I also want to acknowledge Dave Brown and Doug Spellman, valued members of our Board of Trustees. They have done so much to educate the next generation of international relations professionals on Taiwan and cross-strait relations. I look forward to hearing both Richard's and Dave's thoughts during the panel discussion. Before I dive into U.S. Taiwan relations, I'd like to provide the broader strategic framework that underpins this important bilateral relationship. As a Pacific power, the United States has a vital interest in the security of our partners and in the overall security of the region. Since early in its history, the United States has recognized the importance of the Asia-Pacific region and has had a presence in that region for over a century and a half. Our commitment to the Asia-Pacific remains unwavering. A few data points help illustrate the importance of Asia to the United States. The percentage of Americans who say Asia is more important than Europe to the United States jumped from 21% in 1994 to 52%, a majority, in 2012. We have 5 treaty allies in the region. Those allies remain the bedrock of our engagement. 5 Asian economies, including Taiwan's, are among our top 12 trading partners, while APEC economies purchase nearly 60% of U.S. goods exports. We continue to bolster our alliances and build lasting partnerships across the region. Against this backdrop, the United States considers the security of Taiwan central to the security of the Asia-Pacific. The United States also considers stable cross-strait relations as essential to maintaining regional stability. None of us should take the security of Taiwan for granted. The authors of the Taiwan Relations Act had a keen understanding of the linkage between Taiwan's security and that of the broader region. The act was written with an eye toward helping, and I quote, maintain peace, security, and stability in the Western Pacific. The act asserts that peace and stability in the Western Pacific, and again I'll quote, are in the political, security, and economic interests of the United States and are matters of international concern. Since its passage into law, every U.S. administration has reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to the TRA. The TRA, along with the 3 joint U.S.-China communiques, remains the foundation for U.S. policy toward and engagement with Taiwan. Through this framework, the United States and Taiwan have built a comprehensive, durable, and mutually beneficial partnership, grounded in our shared interests and values. This is truly a long-term, enduring partnership. Taiwan's friends should take comfort in the fact that the discussion in Washington is not whether to deepen our relationship with Taiwan, but rather how best to. A key reason why my U.S. government colleagues value U.S. ties with Taiwan is because Taiwan has shown itself to be a reliable partner on the United States' most pressing security challenges, challenges which threaten not only the United States, but also the entire world. First among those is North Korea, with its reckless pursuit of its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. We thank Taiwan for its recent decision to go beyond the requirements of the UN sanctions in exerting pressure on the DPRK by banning all trade with North Korea. As Secretary Tillerson has said, UN Security Council resolutions represent the minimum of actions we expect the international community to take in putting pressure on North Korea. Taiwan clearly stands in solidarity with our position and has set a valuable example for the international community by cutting off the trade flows that enable the North Korean regime to continue threatening international peace and security. Taiwan is also a valued member of the global coalition to combat ISIS. To support this international effort, Taiwan has contributed money and supplies to help people who have had to flee their homes in Syria and Iraq. AIT is currently working with Taiwan to finalize an additional contribution to support humanitarian survey and ordnance clearance operations in liberated cities. The United States and Taiwan both recognize that violent extremism is a global challenge and requires a shared response by the international community. More generally, Taiwan's participation in the international community is vital precisely because Taiwan has shown time and time again both the will and the ability to play a positive role in addressing global problems. Recognizing that Taiwan has much to offer, the United States will continue to support Taiwan's membership in international organizations where statehood is not a requirement for membership, and its meaningful participation in international organizations where statehood is a requirement. The United States strives to help find new ways for Taiwan to expand its international space outside the traditional UN system. For instance, under the Global Cooperation and Training Framework, or GCTF, we work with Taiwan to address global and regional concerns by leveraging Taiwan's strengths and expertise in areas such as public health and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to help improve the capabilities of others in the region. We value our work together in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, to advance women's economic empowerment, energy, the digital economy, and other priorities. We were also pleased that Representative Gao could attend the Community of Democracies Ministerial hosted by Secretary Tillerson in September. While we work together to address regional and global problems, we should remember that cross-strait stability is a necessary, if not sufficient, condition for broader regional prosperity and stability. Thus, the United States has an abiding interest in cross-strait peace and stability. We believe that a Taiwan that is secure, confident, and free from both isolation and coercion is better able to engage Beijing constructively. Such engagement, in turn, supports a stable and peaceful cross-strait environment. That is why we work to expand Taiwan's international space, build our economic ties, and maintain close security cooperation. In the security realm, over the past decade, the United States has authorized the transfer to Taiwan of some of the most sophisticated weapons needed by Taiwan to maintain its self-defense capability. In June, the Trump administration notified to Congress $1.4 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, underscoring the U.S. vow to uphold its commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act. At the same time, security relations with Taiwan are about much more than arms sales. Taiwan's key defense and military leaders have begun to understand the need to overhaul Taiwan's security concept and embrace modern asymmetric approaches and innovative ways to employ existing capabilities. The United States supports this effort, and we are working with Taiwan to ensure the successful transformation of its defense concept. For example, the Department of Defense is supporting Taiwan's efforts to overhaul its reserve forces and enhance jointness among its military services. These examples are emblematic of our continuing effort to fulfill both the letter and the spirit of the Taiwan Relations Act. Let me underscore here, the United States will continue to make available to Taiwan defense articles and services necessary to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability. The U.S. commitment under the TRA is firm, but it alone will not secure Taiwan in an increasingly complex regional environment. Taiwan must do its part to invest in capabilities that deter aggression and would help Taiwan mount an effective defense should deterrence fail. While we commend Taiwan for the considerable strides it has made, it can and must do more as the security threat against it continues to evolve. Taiwan's defense spending, simply put, has not kept pace with the changing environment, and it must address this situation with real urgency. Taiwan is spending significantly less on defense as a percentage of GDP than others that face similarly sophisticated threats, such as Israel, South Korea, and Ukraine. Taiwan must do better. But let me be clear, Taiwan faces both security and economic challenges, and thus Taiwan's continued economic security and vitality are equally important to the United States. This is why we endeavor to deepen our economic ties. U.S. Taiwan economic ties are extensive, as we have grown to become each other's 10th and second largest goods trading partners, respectively. We continue to work through the process of the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, or TIFA, to address trade issues and market access barriers facing U.S. companies and investors. We are also actively identifying new opportunities for collaboration through our Digital Economy Forum, a venue for dialogue between our public and private sectors on a wide range of cooperative topics. The U.S.-Taiwan economic relationship is strong, but could be even stronger. If Taiwan is to reinvigorate its economic growth, that will be done, in part, by pursuing through the TIFA mechanism the economic liberalization to which Taiwan has committed. If we can successfully use bilateral mechanisms like TIFA to resolve trade irritants between our two economies, that will help foster even stronger and closer trade relations. I have had the honor of discussing our relationship with President Tsai, both in Taiwan and in the United States. I know that she deeply values this relationship and will do her part to move it forward. My interactions with President Tsai have reaffirmed my conviction that she is a responsible, pragmatic leader. The United States appreciates her determination to maintain stable cross-strait ties in the face of increasing pressure from the PRC on a number of fronts. It's clear that the cross-strait relationship currently suffers from a lack of trust and communication. The United States will continue to urge both sides to engage in constructive dialogue and to demonstrate patience, flexibility, and creativity in finding ways to engage with each other in order to avoid miscalculation and resolve their differences. The United States will continue to insist on the peaceful resolution of differences between the PRC and Taiwan in a manner that is acceptable to the peoples on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. There should be no unilateral attempts by either side to change the status quo. After all, peaceful and stable cross-strait relations not only serve the two sides of the Taiwan Strait, but also the interests of the United States and of the broader region. The United States endeavors to improve our economic partnership, support Taiwan's confidence and freedom from coercion, deepen the bonds of friendship between our people, and ensure that Taiwan can continue to make positive contributions to the international community. The United States considers Taiwan a vital and reliable partner in Asia, one which merits our continuing support. I began by noting Taiwan's importance in a broader regional context, and I'd like to close by returning to that theme. The United States has an abiding interest in Taiwan's security and has built a comprehensive, long-term relationship with Taiwan within the framework of the U.S. broader Asia strategy. The United States intends to remain steadfast in deepening its ties with Taiwan and upholding policies consistent with the TRA. To quote Secretary Mattis, "We will not use our allies and partners or our relationship with them or the capabilities integral to their security as bargaining chips." I look forward to continuing to advance this important relationship. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I was trying to think if there was anything that you said that I could take issue with or challenge you on or contradict you, and I'm not sure I can think of a thing. And I wasn't just referring to the kind words you said about me at the beginning. So since we have a lot of smart people in the audience, I'm going to open it up right away. I may have an idea, may have a question. And the rules are wait for the microphone, identify yourself, and keep your question brief because obviously Jim's a very smart guy. I'm going to start with my old boss, Stanley Roth. And so, John Zong, you'll have the second question, not the first. But let's start with Stanley, and then I'll go back there. Okay, right here. Okay, no, back up here.
Oh,
Up here.
my bad. I'm so sorry.
Quite all right. Stanley Roth, retired, former partners in crime with both these guys. I wanted to go to one of your final remarks when you talked about both sides needing patience, flexibility, and creativity. And while that strikes me as a great aspiration, it strikes me as unreal on one side. When I look at President Xi, I see zero flexibility, the dogmatic insistence on saying the words about the consensus. It's the opposite of flexibility. Numerous reports, I can't say, since I have no access to classified, it's true, that diminishing patience wants a resolution possibly on his watch. can't be creative if one side isn't willing to engage, but in fact is increasing pressure. So that strikes me as the right formula with no chance of success. And that leads me to the bottom line question. Is it really anything Taiwan can do, or is it really more the credibility of the U.S. deterrence that is the key to the future security of Taiwan?
Oh, you've got two separate questions implied there. I mean, in the sense of what you said about creativity, patience, flexibility, I think you're right. We haven't seen one side warm-heartedly endorsing those concepts, and that makes it even all the more urgent that we continue to push on it, continue to let the one side that is not showing those characteristics understand how important it is to us that they do. In terms of deterrence, there are lots of things that Taiwan can do, and I think their military is beginning to look at them, coming up with new concepts. I think the three key words you heard out of me was asymmetric, innovative, and urgent. Those words actually have been used off and on by the Taiwan military itself for quite a while now. What we are doing is encouraging more rapid adoption of the steps that would actually put those concepts into implementation.
Okay. John Zong? Mike's coming.
Thank you, the two chairmen. John Zhang with CTI TV of Taiwan. Mr. Chairman, how do you see President Tsai's recent National Day address? Is it sufficient to jumpstart the cross-strait dialogue, or what is lacking that the U.S. can help overcome to actually restart the cross-strait dialogue? Do you have any realistic expectation for cross-strait relations after the 19th Party Congress in Beijing? Then I have a logistic question, if I may. APEC is about to convene. Will Secretary Tillerson follow the practice of his two predecessors, having a bilateral with James Song? Thank you.
Well, actually, I think we'll have to wait a little bit. I don't think that the Secretary's schedule is completely set yet, and it's probably inappropriate for me to comment on it. As you see Richard digging at me in the ribs here. In terms of jump-starting the cross-strait dialogue after the 19th Party Congress, to state an obvious, that's going to be up to the players on both sides of the strait. I think the previous question outlined the issue. Another way to ask your question is, will the view in Beijing evolve to a point where restarting the dialogue, a more meaningful dialogue, would make sense? And I have no control over decisions on that side of the strait.
If I could just supplement, I've seen reports in the Taiwan media that President Tsai is actually planning to do a major address at the end of the month on cross-strait relations once she knows what Xi Jinping has said about Taiwan at the 19th Party Congress. And that seems to make a lot of sense.
The President's remarks.
The President's, I didn't answer the first part of the question. I thought they were appropriate. I mean, I do think, and particularly as you look at cross-strait sections, I don't think that there was anything inflammatory. I think they were not unhelpful at all. I think they were just solid remarks, sort of at a time when, let's face it, everybody is waiting to see what happens in the 19th Party Congress, including all 1.4 billion Chinese.
So the woman in the middle there.
Thank you, Richard. Rita Chen from the Central News Agency, Taiwan. My question is about the new face from the Chinese side. Taiwan is going to have to face the new director of the Taiwan affair from the Chinese side. I'm just wondering, the chairman, are you familiar with Liu Jieyi? If so, what's your impression about him? And do you have any suggestion for Taiwan after the 90 Party Congress? How can Taiwan to deal and engage with the new face from the Chinese side? Thank you.
Now, normally I wouldn't say anything on this topic. I've actually known Liu Jie for about 25 years. He was one of the first officials I dealt with in Beijing. I actually found him very reasonable at that time. So I don't think that he's going to be an impediment if progress is going to be made, if that's the core of your question. And I hope I'm not causing him trouble by saying that. But anyhow, I think he is a seasoned diplomat who's pretty well thought of.
I'm sure any Chinese official you give praise to is going to do very well in his career. So let's do Donghui, and then Garrett, and then Shirley.
Thank you. Donghui Yu with China Review News Agency of Hong Kong. Today, the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House passed the bill of Taiwan Travel Act. So if the bill is passed finally on the Capitol Hill and is executed by the Trump administration, do you believe the nature of the U.S. Taiwan unofficial relationship will be somehow changing? Thank you.
Well, I was always taught by a very smart person, maybe Richard himself, that you don't deal in hypotheticals. And I think everybody in this room realizes that Congress has its authority, the executive has its authority. There's always a question of how those two balance out, and it's always premature to comment on any piece of legislation until it actually becomes law signed in by the President of the United States.
So Garrett van der Wees.
Hi, Garrett van der Wees, former editor of Taiwan Communique. In your remarks, you said that the security of Taiwan is essential to the security of the Asia-Pacific. How does the policy of the Tsai administration, the new Go South policy, fit in that? She is trying to strengthen relations with Southeast Asia in particular. Does that play a role there?
Well, let's put it this way. Any country has any entity has issues in deciding how much it's going to rely on one trading partner. And I think that there has been a very healthy debate in Taiwan about the question of overdependence on one market. The United States, and I actually did have clear talking points on this, doesn't have any problems with Taiwan trying to expand its economic partners. Let's face it, a lot of other folks around the world that were that dependent on one market would be trying to diversify its sources of trade. So makes sense in terms of economic policy on it alone.
Shirley Lin.
Thank you, Ambassador. My question relates to defense, and you mentioned it, and it relates also to to President Tsai's initiative economically to strengthen defense by having more indigenous weapons, trainers, and submarine. But first off, to come back to your speech, is Taiwan doing enough to defend itself? As you know, in the last few weeks in Taiwan, everyone's talking about the new thought of 2020 and how long can Taiwan hold down the fort. In your discussion, is Taiwan moving forward in this? If not, what are the impediments? There's a very strong, vibrant debate on the island itself. And second is President Tsai's initiative, as I said, in developing indigenous weapons, something that you would encourage?
The first question is one that's pretty complex in the sense that we do see Taiwan beginning to take a lot of good steps, relooking at its concepts for defense, and as I said earlier, recognizing the need for asymmetric and innovative approaches. I think overall, we would like to see Taiwan moving faster, that there does need to be a sense of urgency about the problems that Taiwan is confronting right now. In terms of Taiwan's indigenous development of weapons, there are several good explanations as to why Taiwan might want to do this. I would hope, however, that if it goes ahead down that route, it would do it in a way that really looked at the question of whether this is supporting the concept of asymmetric and innovative defense, or is it more geared towards traditional systems that might not come into being or utility for a long time. We do think that there's a need for some urgency, that the underlying problems and threats need to be addressed.
What was your second question?
I think I got them both, didn't I? Good enough.
Let me respond to your question in a different way, and I've written about this, so this is nothing new. Certainly, there is a hard security threat to Taiwan that stems from Beijing's growing military capabilities. I worry that there's also what you might call a soft security threat, the danger that Beijing might undertake a vigorous intimidation campaign against Taiwan, using all the or most of the instruments of power. A shot is never fired, but the existence of those military capabilities hangs like a dark cloud over the whole process. And it's easy to focus on the need to prepare yourself for a hard security action. Whether you can do it or not, it depends on a lot of issues. I think the intimidation side is more difficult because it goes not just to military power, it goes to the power of a society and the capability of a society. One might even say that at a very low level, the intimidation is already happening. So, Russell.
Oh, can I actually add on to your point, which is, to a degree, it is allowed to happen, or it flourishes in an environment where people assume that nothing can be done except relying on the U.S. shield. Frankly, folks who know a lot more about security than I do tell me repeatedly that there are lots of things that Taiwan can do that would deter any invader effectively. And those are the sorts of things that we are trying to encourage Taiwan to. I think they're belonging in these new concepts that we talk about, but we want to see those concepts fleshed out quickly to deter folks to the extent that the people on Taiwan understand that they have a robust defense against anybody trying to land on their beaches or trying to intimidate them through force or the threat of force.
So Russell Xiao.
Okay. Russell Xiao with the Global Taiwan Institute. Thank you, Ambassador. My question relates to the comments, the allegations that were made by the President of the Philippines regarding the responsibility of an international criminal network headquartered in Taiwan for the transshipment of drugs using Philippines to the United States and asking the United States to help. My question is, how can the United States help? And whether or not do you see this perhaps as something that the global cooperation and training framework between the United States and Taiwan can be utilized to enhance the mutual legal assistance agreements between the two sides in addressing the legal means by which the United States and Taiwan can work with other international partners, because this is, in fact, an international criminal network and not just one that's isolated to Taiwan or the Philippines. So your response to that, please.
Yes, I will say that the isolation of Taiwan in the international police community is something that the U.S. worries about. And we did see the comments from President Duterte, and we have been trying to reach out to see what response is appropriate. And I understand that the Taiwan authorities are also reaching out to the Philippine side. And if there is a way for us to help facilitate things, if there is a way to improve cooperation on these issues, with us playing a facilitator role, we'd be interested in looking into it.
Yes, Joe Bosco.
Thank you. Joe Bosco, formerly with the Defense Department. Ambassador, thank you for your remarks. I noted that you referred to Taiwan as a country and then
No, I did not.
corrected yourself.
Joe, hold the mic a little closer.
You corrected yourself.
I'm not allowed to.
Call it. Okay, let's talk about the entity of Taiwan then. I think we appreciate your listing the various contributions that Taiwan has made to the international community. There was one that I think you oversight did not mention. That was its participation in the Proliferation Security Initiative, in which there are 95 or 100 countries participating, but not China. Taiwan has not only participated, it intercepted a North Korean ship that had illegal components. But another thing you said that was of interest was that neither side should do anything to destabilize the cross-strait relationship. Now, Richard has recently written that China is considering setting an ultimatum, a schedule or a timetable. Is that incorrectly reported?
Said that might be something they could do if they wanted to change the current policy.
Okay, well, if they did such a thing, would you consider that a destabilizing move? It's analogous to what they did in 2005 with the build-up to the anti-secession law, and the U.S. took a very mild response to that. I think there's a danger here that unless the U.S. makes it clear that that kind of move would be unacceptable, it may happen.
Yeah, I think you always face the problem of preemptively taking options out of leaders' hands. I would say that this isn't 2005 anymore. You know, times have changed quite a bit. The issues, the threats have changed quite a bit, and so I would expect a different response is all I'm going to say right here.
John?
Chia Cheng from United Daily News. We know that TIFA talks usually takes place in October, and we haven't heard anything as of now. Does this mean that the talk has been suspended this year? And if yes, are we taking any other forms to further enhance the economic relationship between U.S. and Taiwan?
You said TIFA, or what was the...
TIFA talk.
TIFA talks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the TIFA talks are not scheduled right now. There were pre-TIFA conversations in July in Taipei, and they did not go badly. But you know, there is a question of how do we hammer things out. There are issues where I think we're pretty close, and perhaps the best way for us to begin strengthening the economic relationship is to begin talking more on some issues where we still have some daylight but are pretty close to agreement. I do think, as I said earlier, that we need to discuss the problems that we see in our economic relations, and I do think that we will be talking on those going forward. But no, October was never suggested as a TIFA date, as far as I know either, or at least not from our side.
In the very back, and then I'll come up here.
Thank you. My name is Xiang Xin, come from Fudan University.
I didn't recognize you.
Yes, I'm a visiting scholar at the Johns Hopkins Science. I have a question that is just a few days ago, the head of the Ing-wen of Taiwan, like Mr. Lai Xingde, say something about Taiwan instead of ROC is a sovereignty and independent state, and something like that. I want to know what's your comment about those kind of speeches. Thank you.
Well, we're not going to respond to every single comment by every single Taiwan politician or administrator. We will look closely at any policy changes that might be getting considered in Taiwan, and I think it was made pretty clear after those remarks that those remarks did not represent any policy direction that the current administration wanted to go in. So it seems as though that's a dead issue, and so we're not going to comment on it.
Just a historical point. I went back when I was writing another book to see when was the first time a Taiwan leader had said the ROC is an independent sovereign state, and it was Jiang Jieshi around 1971. So this is not a new concept. Whether the people who listen to this concept understand it is another question, but It's a thread that's run through cross-strait relations for a long time. Yes, right here. Sorry.
Hi, Lauren Holt, Holt Global Strategies. It's nice to see you, Ambassador, former State Department. So I have two questions. The first one is on security, Taiwan's current role update on the South China Sea issue. And the second one about trade. When TPP was still ongoing, we thought it was a go potentially. I know that Taiwan wanted to be considered to be part of TPP. Now that U.S. is out of it, it seems like Japan might be taking up some of that leadership role. Is Taiwan working closer with Japan to potentially do some things in that area? Thank you.
Okay. With respect to security in the South China Sea, it looks like the current administration in Taipei is pursuing a low profile. It's been less assertive in recognizing the broader, or pushing the broader claims that it inherited from previous administrations in Taiwan. It hasn't abandoned them, but has been less assertive, let's put it that way. And so in a way, it's trying to be very careful not to inflame things further in a region that is very delicate. With respect to trade, can't really comment on Japan. I do think that there is Taiwan interest in strengthening economic ties with Japan. They are taking some steps to try and soothe out some of the perennial problems there, and to the extent they can, we would welcome it, of course. With respect to trade with the United States, TPP is no longer on the table for us. There's been a lot of talk in Taiwan about a bilateral free trade agreement. We're more interested right now in trying to pursue, through the TIFA mechanism, as I said in my remarks, bilateral issues and try to resolve bilaterally some of the issues that come up. And frankly, we're going to get addressed within the TPP framework. So we're looking at these things, trying to figure out a way forward with Taiwan. Anything that increases their ties economically in the region and in the world is something we would welcome.
Yes, back there. And then maybe this will be the last question.
Hi, Jonathan Robeson from CSIS. I'm just wondering if the Taiwanese are expressing any concern about the Trump administration and their similar to comments about NATO or South Korea and Japan, and about our obligations to Taiwan's security, and upholding those obligations.
Well, they're not expressing them to me, let's put it that way. I do think that like the people of every entity, I'm choosing my term carefully, the people on Taiwan focus primarily on that which is closest to them. And I do think Taiwan needs to see that we continue to value our alliances in the region, that we will continue to uphold our commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act. NATO, in theory, is interesting. It's much less important than what we do with respect to North Korea, and more importantly, what we do with respect to keeping our alliances and our presence strong and cooperative in East Asia as a whole. So nobody's raised it with me in terms of the president, but I do think that everybody needs to be reassured during every administration. We heard this during the Bush administration. I'm sure Ryan heard this during the Obama administration. Well, how reliable is the United States? We can say it all we want, but we prove it by actions. And I think we are proving that as I speak in East Asia.
Okay, Jeanette, one last question.
That was so enthusiastic. Okay.
Jeanette Jiang, China Times. Just follow the question actually and the answer. Trump's administration seems to have the most ambitious try to build up the relationship with China. That's the notion about the 15 years relationship.
in the future with China and American. I'm just wondering, in that case, where is Taiwan standing in here? And also, to your understanding, that's about so-called 15 years relationship with China, American and China?
Again, I did this when I was at the NSC. Ryan did this when he was at the NSC. If we're not looking deep into the future, we're not doing our jobs. You know, it is important to try and figure out where we're going to be in the future. And then somehow the leap to, therefore, we must be negotiating a fourth communique. It is a leap, frankly. You know, and whenever senior officials involved in previous communiques show up at the White House, we'll get a spate of articles wondering what's happening. I know nothing about a fourth communique. I can't imagine what the contours of a fourth communique would be. I know you're not asking directly about this, but there is a question of what the U.S.-China relationship is going to look like, not just 50 years down the road, but 10 years down the road. We know what we would like to see that relationship look like. Frankly, we don't know if China holds that same vision or even a similar vision. And therefore, it becomes very, very difficult to predict what U.S.-China relations are going to look like. And any administration is going to be very careful, or should be very careful, in trying to map out the future of a China that is obviously changing so much and evolving so quickly, and frankly being so much assertive in Asia in general.
Just to supplement, I think it's obviously China is very different from the entity it was at the time of the Nixon opening almost 50 years ago. Asia is very different than it was then. The United States is very different, and Taiwan's very different. And so naturally there's going to be an evolution if people are focused on the reality of the situation. I think to some extent this talk about the next 50 years is just an acceptance that we're in a different world. So enough of a sermon for me. Please join me in thanking Jim Moriarty for his views and his comments. Thank you.
Thank you.